holding this particular session, I managed to invite up to 8 different panelist speakers. We can call them senior professionals. Some of them looks like veterans. Who is the oldest one here? Okay, and then we got this very young man in a very red background. Okay, that I think he's the youngest. Right? Alvin, are you the youngest? I'm sure you are. And I think maybe I'm the oldest. Maybe I'm not. But the fact that we are eight different panelists at this point in time with 8 different experiences or background. I'm not going to go through all their names because I'm going to introduce them later one by one, and then they will then share their background, their company's background, and their thoughts on 2021. But let's do this, right? Let's do a summary, right? We know what happened in 2020. If some of you are like me, when you wake up on the 1st of January, you actually thought that you wake up on 1st of January 2020 because the entire 2020 was a blur. Everything sort of like compressed, and you spent almost 9 months at home. You didn't go to work. So if you have a crystal ball or you have a way to turn back time, 2020 actually didn't happen. So we are in 2020, right? Well, no, we are in 2021. But what is happening in 2021, what is changing in 2021 is more exciting because the vaccines and therapeutics are coming out, but they're not coming out in the speed that we think they're coming out. So there is going to be a delay in the economic development side. And that's the reason why we picked these 8 different speakers, because each of them coming with different point of view could share their views on some of these developments. Let me introduce them one by one. I have Xavier from SSI Schaefer. So he'll be representing the material handling equipment, or at least the equipment or hardware side. I have Mitch. Mitch comes from a consulting and research company. He'll be touching very much on the digital world, at least the e-commerce side. The young man that I say is Holio, Alvin. Alvin is basically from a startup, disrupting the industry like crazy because he didn't know that his father is still angry with him. We have Graham. Graham is from SAP. I kept on saying it's a software. Graham corrected me a few days ago and says, we are more than a software. So I'll let Graham talk about this later. Wei Chen from EDB. Those who are from Singapore, you know, the Economic Development Board drives the economic development of Singapore. So Wei Chen will have things to share and say as well. Jaya with the futuristic background. Jaya is actually from Schneider Electric. He runs the logistics operations for Schneider, at least out of Singapore side, but he runs Asia Pacific. Mark Palin. Mark is the Senior Vice President for Contract Logistics in Kuehne Nagel. Mark will be sharing from the 3PL's point of view. Interestingly, we also have Evelyn, 3PL, but yet Evelyn actually is the CIO of Jodis. So as a CIO of Jodis, Evelyn may have a different point of view.
I think there's a trinity. I call it trinity because there are 3 big things that happened. One was, I think for the first time, we ourselves knew ourselves a bit more, how resilient we are. And it's a period of discovery of ourselves in terms of how we have to unlearn, rethink, and reinvent ourselves. So there's a lot of things that rebutted our normal thought process, the way we work, strategies like manufacturing strategies where centralized locations. Some of these strategies were now questioned whether it's correct or wrong, right, in the new world. Even our workplaces, how we manage our people, even when we manage our suppliers, we used to worry only about 1 tier. Now we talk about 2nd tier, 3rd tier, because the dynamics have changed so much that it questioned everything that we took as a norm. So I think last year gave us a chance to test ourselves, discovery, learn, and made us question everything that we took for a norm, right? And the third part of the trinity was actually, it brought us another flavor that how technology plays such an important part in helping us navigate these whole challenges. And something that we may not have taken And I said technology is a very broad word. There's many things to it, IoT, which I think later Paul will go deeper into it. But the point is that technology became a forefront of our navigation through 2020. I think that's a very important learning. And last but not least, I think 2020 also brought the entire profession to another level. For the first time, people start to understand supply chain. They realize how important supply chain, because never before supply chain was brought to that level. Because now we question and we ask, when is our food going to be on the table? And then all of a sudden people realize that, oh, what they took for granted right now, if you don't have containers moving, you don't have air freights, you don't have road transport or what have you, or even people going to the factories, you're not going to get food on the table. So supply chain all of a sudden became a very important part of our lives. So I think from a profession perspective, I think more people would like to get interested in supply chain now as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
I think what has resulted from the crisis is a greater attention placed into supply chain organizations. That would translate into more resources and investments being put in the hands of supply chain professionals. And actually, that's what we are starting to see with companies that we're having conversations with. A lot more discussions around how to drive the transformation of supply chain. And I think as a result of that, I think we will really be compelled to think about how we, in this particular domain of supply chain, how we navigate and how we transform the supply chains for the future.
Then while there was the movement orders and everything, store closures, everything going on, and a lot of brands, they saw up to 30% spike within their e-com business, which is tremendous. And that's something what they have probably foreseen in I don't know, 5 to 10 years from now. Overall, the e-com business here in Southeast Asia is around 100 billion in 2020, and it's expected to be tripled by 2025. And then, of course, along with that, and along with the high volumes which we're seeing, there is a very big ask for scalable e-com fulfillment, right? And a lot of companies saying, like, you know what, you need to centralize, you need to do this and that. It's not always that way. So we're also looking into micro fulfillment. We're looking in automation for fulfillment, but also for systems. So that's definitely one which the need for it was definitely accelerated. Additionally, rise of social commerce. So I'm not sure for the guys who are here online on Facebook, Instagram and whatnot. So you have the option now to buy directly on these platforms. And that is a game changer for the whole industry. And I'm even saying that in a way that Lazada, Shopee, and the likes which we have over here, they should be quite concerned, because this is an option where you can directly convert consumer where the demand happens. So e-commerce growth accelerated, and it will stay that way. So brands and retailers, they need to be ready. And the most important part, they cannot just simply plan for this year or for the next year. They need to look into the next 5 to 10 years how they want to develop.
Personally, as a CIO, I always find that, IT, investment in IT or technology, it's not that, it's not that people are not really investing in technology unless and until you can prove, your ROI, right? And the business benefit. But because of this COVID pandemic, right, this digital acceleration have to be accelerated. Like take for example, in Geodis, right? When the pandemic first started, we have only in a couple of weeks where we have to enable our colleagues to work from home, right? So can you imagine, like before that, right? In a traditional supply chain organization, right? You have desktops, and how are you going to get these people to carry their desktop homes? Well, we managed to do it, right? And not only that, we see that with this pandemic, there were a lot of disruptions. People are not able to get to the office as one thing, even in the warehouses, right? We are not able to get, people may not be able to get the enough resources to work in the warehouse. And therefore, this pushes the need for automation.
For C, the supply and demand issues are continuing, and we see that continuing going forward. And it's an interesting position to be in right now. And I know the team seem to be working harder than ever at the moment. We're trying to talk about productivity and improving efficiency, but it's very hard to do that in this environment. And then the other side of the C is the digitalization. Most companies are looking at how they offer services to customers and digitalizing that as much as possible and preparing for that even more. So we see that continuing going into 2021 and beyond. In terms of air, vaccines. Gosh, ready or not, they're here, right? So we see that continuing. It's not going to be a Q1 or Q2 issue. It's going to be probably the next 2 years. We think it being a topic. So we're ready for that, and even if we're not, other people will be. So we need to be ready for that. We see a clear line in terms of the dissolving between B2B and B2C. That's continuing, and we expect that to go even faster in 2021. Sustainability is a key differentiator. Our customers are demanding that we also propose not just on price, but on what we're doing on the on sustainability and the environment, and how they can use that to meet their own requirements and partner with us to improve that area. So that's a differentiator for us, and we see that happening more and more going forward.
It have actually helped or forced many companies to test whether the business continuity plans we had in place were actually working. And probably all of us were proven wrong. Like I said, nobody was ready for this. Nevertheless, on the positive side, I think I have to say also we sort of managed to adapt quite quickly about a number of things. To me now, really the big question is, I think there is no doubt that the markets will grow faster in the next few years, depending on how fast we are able to resolve the virus situation in our region to start with. Now, the big question to me is what markets are going to grow at what speed? Who's growing faster? I'm not talking about just the countries. Obviously, China at the moment is leading the whole growth in the economy. This year, they will probably grow at 2.6%, and next year, probably back to 7%. But we have some countries already in Asia, Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, growing, like Taiwan, for example, growing already this year. But I can see 2021 is still some big challenges with Indonesia, I'm afraid, with India and probably the Philippines as well, to get the virus under control. So as far as our customer is concerned, I think, again, what is going to happen is going to be driven by speed to market. How fast are we able to react to get our goods, our solutions into the market? And the same will apply for everybody else. In the next few years, I do see the whole region, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa, becoming one big region, completely decoupled. And I know this is going to become a question later about this decoupling thing from US. I think from a business perspective, our region will be totally decoupled from Europe and from North America, because this region is now growing at much faster speed than the rest of the world.
And that's why when we look at 2020, what did we see happen? We saw, first of all, that everyone talks about resilience as being the answer to this disruption. And indeed that is the case. But if you think about resilience, resilience means that something's tough. It means that it bounces back. And actually, there was a nuance on this, because it became very, very clear that we weren't going to bounce back. People use the terminology new normal. We're not going to bounce back to where we were pre-COVID. And therefore, more and more of the conversations that we're having right now, which stretch through into 2021, are not just about building resilient supply chains, but it's having supply chains that can pivot, supply chains that are agile, to be in a position to cope with whatever the next disruption is thrown at us. So I think for us, the positive thing that we're seeing is disruption continues. It's more massive than it's ever been before. Organizations are discussing how do they build resilience and agility into their supply chains. But organizations have moved from how do we survive to how do we thrive, and how do we get ready for the recovery. And what we're seeing in the marketplace, and this really brings me to the 2021, is that where organizations had a digital transformation agenda and maybe supply chain was 0.5 or 0.6 on that agenda, today digital supply chain's 1 or 2 on the list. So supply chain has become digital transformation for us, the digitizing of supply chains. And many organizations today are really looking at how do we use technology, how do we manage these processes so that we're ready for that recovery phase, and how do we look at the holistic end-to-end process right the way through from how we develop products, how we manufacture products, how we ship products, and beyond. So again, I think 2021, for me, I'm pretty optimistic about it, because I think, first of all, organizations are bracing themselves and building supply chain resilience to cope with the recovery disruption. And I think secondly, although it's been a bumpy year in 2020, if you look at it, and if you just look at the comments about e-commerce earlier, it is bumpy, but it's not bumpy in all sectors. And there are many, many sectors that are actually thriving right now and investing right now and really looking at how they can support the growth through recovery phases.
We talked about technology deployment. I think the reality on the ground, me coming from someone from the ground, dealing with a lot of drivers on a day-to-day basis, I think for 2020, startups in general, I think across the board, we have seen a lot of money still being poured into the industry. I mean, across the board for startups, I think that's something that is still common. Cash flow has actually become a lot tighter. So that's one aspect that I think downstream, a lot of the strains that we have seen, a lot of these trucking companies, they actually do a lot of outlays and reimbursements on behalf. So the other point that maybe for 2021, I think it's going cashless is something that I think is going to become a norm. We hear a lot on the government pushing for the F&B and hawkers going cashless, and I think that's something that the logistics and transportation industry is going to move into. The depots will be moved to cashless. And I think a lot of efficiency gains are something that e-logistics companies like myself will continue to see. There will be a drive towards digitalization that might come from inverted comma disruptive businesses like myself, that in the past I think a lot of bigger companies actually also kind of fear, because we are just going to go out there and kill the market, right? But I think a lot of that has also struck a little bit of balance because of the venture world changing a lot.
Just one word, one sentence that you can say for 2021.
I think e-logistics will be here. I think that's where that's how I believe lah. So e-logistics, so incumbents going online or startups driving logistics to actually go So e-logistics is the word for me.
All right. Well, I'll say the one word again. The one word has got to be recovery. And I think associated with that one word, there is massive, massive opportunity. And I think the smart companies, the world-class companies that have got world-class processes will really maximize the opportunity. So I'm really optimistic about 2021.
Yeah, well, I said earlier, I see 21 as a sort of a bridge year for the future market. So it's all to do with this year. We have time for ourselves to realign our business for the future, whichever it's going to be. And that is, to me, the key for this year.
Yeah, I think the word for me is cautiously optimistic in 2021. We need to stay close to our customer base and understand what they're doing and what their pressures are, but also one eye on the economy and what's happening across the different markets, as well as the geopolitical issues, which in theory could be on a collision course, and we need to be aware of that.
So for me, it's more on learning from what we have actually experienced in 2020 and continue to accelerate, the use of technology in the industry.
As the e-com guy, obviously I have 3 words. It's continuous e-commerce acceleration. So what we have seen in 2020 with up to 30% of e-com, we're not going back to below 10. This is not going to happen. So companies need to get ready, and in order to stay relevant, they need to boost their capabilities on e-com.
Hi, for me, the word is hopeful. I'm realistic of the challenges ahead like Mark, but also hopeful of the opportunities that are available to those who are ready to change and adapt.
A catchphrase to me will be supply chain nightmare to supply chain revolution.
I mean, I think it's adaptability because, whether it's COVID or whether it's the US geopolitical situation or whether it's whatever it is, we've got to adapt. And I think if one thing that we have learned in the COVID era is that we have to adapt very quickly, we have to be agile, and we have to use all means of technology to enable that new adaptation. And that kind of sums it up to me for the industry. For Geodis, it's one word: transformation.
Like what I said when I started, 2020 was a blur. So for me, 2021 is let's wake up, folks. Let's get things done. You have to keep moving. If you don't keep moving, the world will stop. You folks basically are supply chain professionals. In your own ways, in your own action, you're helping the supply chain to move. So stay awake, participate. We have until 31st of December 2021 to finish this. Supply Chain Asia is here to stay. We continue to do our work, and we are looking forward to all the support that all you all of you can give.